Hey there, Real Estate Junkies. Before we dive into today's episode, we've got some game changing resources to help you start buying and selling real estate on terms, the smart, creative way. Want to learn how to invest with little or no money down? Grab your free ebook, The 4 Game Plans, and discover the exact strategies we use every day. Get it now. The link is in the show notes. Looking for a complete step-by-step system to start making 3 paydays per deal? Check out the Quantum Leap System, our home study course packed with everything you need to close your first terms deal. Need a personalized strategy? Book a free one-on-one strategy session with one of our coaches. Just use coupon FREE3 at checkout. Ready to take action? Join the 3 Payday Apprentice Program and start working toward real estate success with direct mentorship. Want hands-on training with us? Spend 3 days at our In the Trenches Bootcamp, where we'll work side by side to lock in deals. And don't miss our biggest event of the year, QOS Live 2025. Connect with top investors, sharpen your skills, and take your business to the next level. Secure your spot today. All links are right below in the show notes. Click now and start building your real estate empire. Now, let's get into today's episode. So now it frees up all this time for you to focus on making these follow-up dials, maybe going on appointments, especially if contracts can take a long time to get those filled out. Now you're gonna review it. You're not just gonna rely on her to fill out the contract and send it out. That brings me to another point, Rick, which is at some point, yes, you want to get an EA, and she is doing some buyer stuff. But eventually, I think you're heading that way. You want to get to a seller specialist, which is initial dial, a second dial, maybe setting up the appointments where all you're doing is going on appointments and coming back and sending out offers. Welcome back to Real Estate Junkies Coast to Coast. I'm your co-host, Rusty Ham on the West Coast. Rick on the East Coast, say hi.
Hey everyone, I'm Rick Abbiati, and yes, I'm on the East Coast of Southern New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. I'm here by San Diego, just a hop, skip, and a jump to San Diego. It's really nice. It's actually raining right now, but all good. Rick, let me ask you this for our warm-up. Again, our warm-up is mindset, skill set, and systems. We're going to talk about mindset today, more specifically on scaling or stacking. Sometimes we use those as synonymous. When to do it when you're a solopreneur, because when we both started in Wicked Smart, we were both solopreneurs, right? We were just by ourselves, making those dials, going on the appointments by ourselves, getting those contracts written up and sending it out. We did have some help on the buyer side with Nick, but we were basically by ourselves. And then in your case, after a certain amount of deals, you scale. So talk about scaling, what that means, number one, who are you going to hire? And then when should we do that?
Yep. What we did, or what I did anyway, is I looked at over the next 3 years what I wanted my team to look like. And that's not being a solopreneur, because obviously I want my business to grow for long-term benefits. So we have various people that we can hire besides a CPA, bookkeeping, and that kind of stuff. And we can go into that briefly. But when you're scaling, the first one that you're going to hire is obviously your VA or your virtual assistant to make calls for you and with you. And Rusty, I'm sure you'll agree that when you first join the community, you don't want to be hiring a VA to make calls for you and just put that work on the VA, because that will go south pretty quickly for many reasons. One, you have to get used to the scripts. You have to know the scripts, because you're the one, when the VA sends you a lead, you're the one who's going to be following up. The other thing is you've got to be able to, you want to meet with your VA every week for half an hour, whatever it is, and critique their calls and do some training. So you treat them pretty much like an employee.
Yeah, great point. Because they're an employee, right? You want to. I tell the associates that come in right off the bat, and you and I both had really busy W-2s. I was a full-time teacher, high school coach. I didn't have a whole lot of time to make dials. I did hire a VA 5 hours a week just to do for sale by owners. and then I did the expireds, and that helped a lot. He was trained already by Chris, so he was like, so I always describe it like you have a VA that's, you open the box, it's all ready, just plug it in, it's all ready to go. Then you have the IKEA where it's in the box, but there's some instructions. All you need to do is just tighten a few screws and it's right there. And then you have the one that you got to make from scratch. A lot of the VAs out there are from the Philippines, they're probably that IKEA type where it comes in a box. They've had some sort of knowledge of what we do, but you still have to train them, right? Just because they've made a few calls for other people doesn't mean they're like super efficient at making dials. So you definitely want to treat them as an employee. You want to make them feel like they're employees and not just some person in the Philippines making dials for you. You want to make them part of the team. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm like now I've scaled from one VA to two, mainly because one VA went on maternity leave, and this coming May will have been with me for 3 years now, but she went on maternity leave and another VA stepped in for her and was consistently sending me leads. All of a sudden now I have two VAs. Wasn't going to drop my current VA or my other VA, obviously, because she was well-trained and she does an awesome job. So now I've got two VAs, but that was a choice that I made.
Yeah. And then the next step that you alluded to it was getting an EA, which is an executive assistant. Describe her or job title, so to speak. And then when did you get her?
So an executive assistant is going to be US based, and they take all the administrative load off of you. So it really frees up your time to make dials and talk to sellers and work with buyers and whatnot. And that can include everything from cleaning out your email, making sure that's clean, and whittle down I had like 12 unread emails, and within less than a week, she had it down to 7. So, and over time, she knows what email I don't need to pay any attention to, a lot of spam stuff and advertisements and stuff. And she knows what I need to see. So she'll alert me as to certain emails I need to look at or review. So along the way, she's also transitioning to do some of the contract stuff, prepare all the contracts. My EA, Megan, she also has taken on one of the biggest things that I had, because I had 2 deals simultaneously with over 500 buyer inquiries, and that took a lot of my time. So she's taken that off my plate. So now she does all the interfaces with the potential buyers until it's time to review their next step form and their financials and qualifications and whatnot. So the EA is really great to have. And I hired mine after I had 4 deals under my belt. So there was enough profit in there that I could afford. I hired her initially as a 1099, and within less than probably about a month and a half, I transitioned her to a W-2 employee.
Yeah. And good point on you made enough profits, because your profits were hovering around 100,000 each, right? Now, disclaimer for everybody, he didn't make $100,000 immediately on each deal. This is over time, but he did get a significant amount up front, which now he's able to hire somebody to take a lot of these things off your plate, because this EA does your email, does all the things that you just described. So now it frees up all this time for you to focus on making these follow-up dials, maybe go on appointments, especially if contracts can take a long time to get those filled out. Now you're going to review it. You're not just going to rely on her to fill out the contract and send it out to that brings me to another point, Rick, which is at some point, yes, you want to get an EA, and she is doing some buyer stuff. But eventually I think you're heading that way. You want to get to a seller specialist, which is initial dial, a second dial, maybe setting up the appointments, where all you're doing is going on appointments and coming back and sending out offers. And then you want to get a buyer specialist, which is similar to what you're saying, which is Megan doing, which is taking inbound calls, setting up buyer meetings, getting the letter of intent ready to go for you when you do go on the buyer meeting, and then have your EA do all the other admin stuff, right? Is that
Yep. My VA also, she takes all of the metrics from the VAs and tracks all the metrics. So she does that. Yesterday, of course, I meet with her twice a week, and she went through and all of the VA calls with sellers that had realtors in the past. She went through all those leads and found out which ones had not yet sold, but are no longer with a realtor. And she sent to each one of the VAs, asked them to follow up with them. So that,
Yeah, pretty cool.
I took that off my plate. So that was awesome. But yes, you seller specialist is the next one that I would be hiring. And you're basically duplicating yourself. So you can now all of a sudden, if you're doing 8 deals a year, now you can probably increase that to 14 to 18, somewhere in there, a number of deals per year.
Yeah, great point. And Chris, our mentor and Wick Smart, we just interviewed him on his podcast, Wick Smart Real Estate Coach. And one of the things he said is he would have hired an EA right away. Like he was a solopreneur for, I think he did 12 or 13 deals before he actually thought about hiring somebody else. And he said, I would have just done it right away. I would have found a way, because a lot of people don't do things because it costs money, right? Startup fees, and there's monthly fees, and I don't have enough. If you are hungry enough, and like you said in the podcast today with Chris, if your why is strong enough, you'll find a way.
Right.
You'll ask somebody, a family friend, or you'll find a business partner that will loan you the money to hire an EA right away, so that all those things, all those tedious things that, that costs $5 an hour job, $10 an hour job, $15 an hour stuff, that is now taken off your plate. And now you are focusing on the high dollar activities, which is going on appointments and sending out offers and creating these contracts, right?
Yep. And a good illustration of that, and looking at it as an investment in your business rather than an expense, was when I had 4 deals, I was doing my bookkeeping, and I was doing it in Excel for a while. And then I went to QuickBooks, and I was spending a lot of time tracking all expenses and all of that kind of stuff. And Chris said, Rick, with 4 deals under your belt, you need to hire a bookkeeping. And I said, how am I going to afford that? And he said, you've got a HELOC, right? And he said, it'll pay you back many times over. And it sure has.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, that's stacking, right? You're going to get a CPA, you're going to get a bookkeeper, you're going to get an attorney, right? So these are people that you need them on your team in order to scale your business and move your business forward, right? If you don't have any things, like you said, if you don't have a bookkeeper and your books are just god awful, and you end up, you're losing money. You have no idea that you're losing money. There's no way that you can scale and increase your business in that way. All right. So that's under our mindset pillar, right? It's definitely a mindset, right? We just talked about it. It's when to scale it. If you want it bad enough, you'll scale quicker than most people. If you just want to be stuck in a solopreneur, then don't do anything and just be a solopreneur, and you'll be stuck in that rut forever. So think about that when you're trying to build a business. All right, let's move on to our game plan. And Rick, we have 4 game plans, right? We have the lease purchase, owner financing, subject to buying the house, subject to the existing mortgage, and an executive lease purchase or an AO, we call it, and a sign out. When we both started, Rick, I'm going to ask you why you switched over, but we both had, I think my first deal was an AO. It was $1 million AO, which was a nice little, some pocket change there for me. And then I got a lease purchase, which was in the mid 800,000. So that was a nice little paycheck for me. But I didn't own the homes, right? It was nice. It was infinite, right? Because I didn't put any money down, and I got a down payment from the tenant buyer. And so it was infinite money in my pocket. Obviously, you're going to have to pay taxes at some point, but there was no money down. I didn't have to get a loan. I didn't have to borrow money from a private lender or anything like that. So it was lucrative, but I didn't get the benefits of owning the home. And then my next 2 deals were subject to, right? So then I was able to get the depreciation because I own the home now. The title transfer to me. I own the home. If there's any repairs that need to be done, I can write those off. So describe yours and what's the benefits. I describe the benefits of owning, but just go through the benefits of owning.
So similar to you, my first deal was not an AO. I've had a couple AOs in my portfolio, but my first was actually a lease purchase. And unusually, the first payday on that was $90,000, which when it came to the payday 3, I had to pay some of that back because it closed out sooner than the 4 years that we had planned on. So you didn't have as much principal pay down to make up that difference. For more details, you can look into our community and see how the deals are structured. But yes, that was nothing down. It was extremely low risk. I found a tenant buyer within 30 days, and that was a quick turn and good profit. Then, and I had heard one of the previous coaches talking about owning the properties, and I thought, let me look into that. So that was the end of me doing lease purchases, and if I can avoid it at all. So my priority is subject to and or owner financing. And when I say and or, some of the properties may have a mortgage for, say, $450,000 and they are asking $800,000, then all of that equity would be done under owner finance. So it'd be a hybrid. And you have the straight owner financing where it's free and clear. And again, like Rusty pointed out, the benefits are you get the depreciation, tax write-offs and whatnot. So that's always my priority, is to lean towards subject to and or owner financing, and then lease purchase, and then AO. And AO is a last resort, even though it's because it's one payday.
Yeah, it's one payday, and we tell our associates because it seems easier, and you describe that off the air why AOs are not as easy. It's easier to get it under contract, but it's not as easy to sell. And we can talk about that. Also, the benefits, Rick, which we talked about, which is subject to. Usually, the subject to owner financings are longer terms, right? Minimum 48 months, typically. But I know that your lease purchase was 48 months, and they cash you out early. However, when you own the home, you have a lot more control on who you put in there. So that hypothetically, you could, yes, these tenant buyers might qualify in 24 months, but we're not necessarily in a hurry to cash them out. We're in a lease purchase. Sometimes we are because we don't, the seller, the title and the mortgage stays in the seller's name. So we technically try to get them cashed out sooner if we don't own it. But if we own it, then we can take our time. For example, I have a sub 2 where their lease is up. They lost their option. So I have a couple of ways to do it. Because I own the home, I could rent it out. I could Airbnb it because it's in a nice little Airbnb area. I could sell it traditionally, or I could find another tenant buyer and put them in there because I have another, I think, 3 years left on my term. Right. So there's that flexibility. And we've talked about owner financing where, we could technically owner finance somebody else. Right. And then now you own that home. Because that you own that home, owner financing, the seller is acting as the bank. You are the owner of the home. You can do whatever you want. You can owner finance it to somebody else for, 10, 15 years at 7, 8%, right? Until they refinance you out. So that's the benefits too, as far as owning the home, is you have more flexibility. The risks are it's your house. If something were to happen, you're ultimately responsible for it.
Yep. And absolute worst case on a lease purchase, the home goes back to the seller.
Right.
And I know Mike McCready's had talked to a seller when a buyer defaulted and about, I think it was extending the term. And the seller said, no, I want the house back.
Yeah.
It's no lose for the seller. But in the other thing to consider, if you get into the higher price ranges in the millions, you may not feel comfortable doing a sub 2 or owner financing, because obviously if a buyer defaults, you're the one who's going to be paying that $8,000 to $10,000 or more mortgage payment. But on the flip side of that, when you have the buyer for a property, they're going to put down probably a few $100,000 down payment. You've got that if you're keeping that in reserves to be able to make that monthly payment until you get another tenant buyer. It's just how comfortable are you with the risk? And that's why some people, when they're new, may lean towards an AO
Right.
with the $1 million property.
Yeah. And we talked about AO not being necessarily a binding agreement. It just gives us the right to market it because we're assigning the buyer back to the seller. So a lot of our success rate as far as selling AOs is lower than if we were to do a lease purchase subject to owner financing for the the fact that it's not a binding agreement. A lot of times the sellers these are FSBOs a lot of the times. So they want to co-market with you and they have a lot more control on how the transaction happens. All we're doing is we're just trying to find them a buyer and matching the buyer up with the seller. We don't make as much. We only get a payday one. And so the success rate for an AO is a lot lower than if we were to stay in the middle. Because if we're staying in the middle, we're trying to find that, not that we're not trying to find a quality buyer for the seller, but we're just not in control if the tenant buyer were to default at any point or if they fall back in. Because if we're in the middle and the buyer is maybe struggling, we can have that conversation with the buyer and say, hey, we're better at getting them back on track and have them get to the finish line than the seller who has no idea how to do this.
And the other thing is where you brought up the fact that it's not a binding contract. It's just an agreement allowing us to market the property. The seller can back out essentially anytime they want, which can happen with AOs. With a lease purchase or sub-to owner financing, those are binding contracts. And technically, if the buyer walked off on it, or if the seller walked out and canceled it, then you'd have a claim against him you could file a lien for any expenses that you've put out on that property trying to find buyers. So it's more enforceable.
Yep. All right, let's cool down, Rick. We've been talking a lot about the In the Trenches boot camp and how important it is to be there. If you are part of the community or if you're not part of the community, you can sit and be a fly on the wall and watch us do our stuff with other associates, making phone calls and all that and doing business plans and deal structuring. But there's also another very important event that we do yearly. I've been going since 2019, then started going to virtual, but now it's back live. This year's October 6th and 7th. It's just a Monday, Tuesday in the awesome city of Boston, downtown Boston. If you are interested in seeing what we do, come meet us live in Boston. It's again, October 6th and 7th of 2025. There is a link in the show notes. Click that link, get your ticket. They're super cheap, right? I think the tickets you just need to find a way to get there. I think that's how we paraphrase it. It's like the tickets are almost free. You just need to find a way to get there. Most of you guys that are in the New England area, it's not that far of a hop, skip, and a jump, right? Just get your butts there because it's super important. Describe a couple of the benefits of going to a live event rather than somewhere virtual.
It's almost indescribable because one, you're not doing things over Zoom, you're doing things face to face. But Chris and the family team, they bring in speakers, some very big name speakers, and whether it's Peter Taunton, who founded Snap Fitness, very successful, or coach, mindset coaching, or business scaling experts. He brings in some big names. So there's that. Plus we do a range of things, anywhere from deal structures to strategic planning type things. There's a lot, but it's not just the daily events. It's the after events where we'll meet somewhere at a bar they have an area set aside for dinner where it's more social, but you get to meet people and talk to people face to face within the community. And it's invaluable, the nuggets you can take away from doing.
Yeah, you definitely weren't hanging out with like-minded people. And it's not salesy. Yes, we want you to join the community. We're not naive to say that we want you to come because we love your company. Yes, we love your company, but we also want you to join the community to start a business and change your lives. It changed both of our lives joining the community. Like, we're both retired now, and we're retired for a reason, because we joined this community. We made that leap of faith and we made deals, and now we're reaping the benefits of those deals. But somebody like Forbes Riley, somebody who's just, if you guys don't know Forbes Riley, Google it. She's super famous in the online, or what was it? The
ABC.
PVC. Yeah. When she showed up, I was like, oh, I recognize her. I was like, I've seen some of those episodes, but yeah. And not only that too, Rick, he brings in, we talk about scaling and CPAs and attorneys and stuff, but he'll bring in CRM people like REI Blackbook. So he will only bring in people that we use, right? So REI Blackbook, we use them. And then you have Adam Carroll with the shred method, which he uses a HELOC to shred away your debt. And you have Mark Willis, who, so whole life insurance, a bank on yourself, right? So these are people that, because they came to QOS, I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. And I hooked up with them. And then now I use those strategies. So it's super important. Like you said, not only socially, you're hanging out with like-minded people, but we're going to bring people to the table that we use, right? Not because they're getting some sort of, we're going to bring them in because of whatever, they're going to give us some sort of affiliate fee. We use them, and we want to present them to you. Click on that link, join us in October, and we'd love to see you guys there. Rick, thank you so much. Twice in
Thank
one.
you.
Great.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. We'll see you later, guys. Take care.
Take
Have
care,
a
everyone.
great